Hi guys, this is Julie from Mission Connections, and today we're talking about missionaries. Are there different types? The short answer to that is yes, there is. And we're going to look at some different ones today, some of the challenges and advantages with each one. So you guys have a little bit more of an option available to you, because we don't always talk about overseas. We can talk about local as well, or a mixture of both, which is, as a friend of mine called it, glocal. So let's go through the first one, and perhaps the oldest of them all, tent maker missionary. Now, back in the day, of course, in ancient times, where housing was not always readily available, tent makers, and as the name suggests, were a main profession of, particularly the Apostle Paul is the greatest example, to gain money so he could go traveling and support himself while he was traveling around. And if you didn't know, obviously he did 3 missionary journeys before his life ended, with a possible 4th that never eventuated. But in all those instances, there was times where he had to support himself, and a lot of those expenses could pile up, of course. And not everybody in the known world could write, so scribes were often required as well, and they could charge a hefty sum. Coming into today's missionary, of course, tent maker missionaries do have the advantage of being able to support themselves. So a lot of the time, of course, whether they're here or overseas, they go into areas of the communities that require their profession. And probably the greatest example of these would be nurses, anyone in the medical field, construction. Those are key professional areas, and there's probably a whole lot more that we could probably add to that list, where those skill sets are highly valued and give you that option. Perhaps the biggest challenge for any missionary, of course, is fundraising, whether it's to fund for a project or to get on the field. So they do need the money. The tent maker missionary, of course, or the backdoor option as it's also referred to, are able to come onto the field a lot quicker than, say, someone who's been trying to get onto the field for quite a period of time, because they don't have to worry so much about having all the funds. Of course, they still have to save money, because you've got to have money to move to wherever you're going to be, whether it's across another part of Australia or overseas. It does cost money, so you do still need to save it, but at least you have a job or a vocation that you can easily slot yourself into. Now, unlike the other missionaries, of course, they do have to abide by visa regulations, but the country actually sets for them, and they do have to abide by any of the other regulations that the country demands of them as well. Apart from that, though, the only challenge perhaps a tent maker missionary would have is the amount of time that they can devote to their field, because they have to work so many hours in a week. They may not be able to get to know the culture as quickly or as in depth as perhaps the on-board missionary can do. But despite that, they do an amazing job. I do know of several people that have chosen this option as a long-term way of doing missions. Perhaps not a great idea long-term, because it does take a lot of energy, and it does take away a little bit perhaps of the opportunities to be able to do all the projects they want to do, because again, their time is very important to them. The onboard accredited missionary, of course, we've done a lot of videos about that in our playlist, and you can see those. These are people that are entirely trusting and relying on God, and getting the sponsorship and support from churches, individuals, and in some cases companies. There are some there are a couple of missionaries I know of that have been fortunate enough to gain some funding that way, and it probably takes the longest. Well, it will depend on your area, of course, and like the other missionaries, there are requirements and health checks and so on that we have to do. The advantages they have, of course, is the scope, I guess, of projects that they are able to do, and they also have a lot more cultural opportunities available to them at the time. So while they have it takes them a lot longer to get the funding, in the long term it's probably a better option because they are able to spend more time, and they also get to know their communities and are able to form relationships, or perhaps a little quicker than others. The final missionary, of course, is the digital missionary, and the digital missionary has multiple advantages. One, it can be done from anywhere. It doesn't have to be in Australia, it can be overseas, as long as you've got Wi-Fi, a good tripod, and the appropriate software. It can be done from anywhere. Of course, relationships don't actually require us to step out of our home, even, as we've all experienced through COVID. We've also been able to use different social medias. That's not necessarily always the case that we have to do that. We do it for promotion, as we've done here, but we do form a lot of relationships. So for us, of course, it's been Instagram and Facebook, and of course we've used the website and YouTube, and in the Japanese context we've used Line and Hello Talk. So they have worked amazingly well and have given us opportunities to get to know people better. And we've also used them through Skype as an additional software. The challenges, of course, perhaps because we have less funding, sometimes that money has to be readily available very quickly, and that's not always the case because we're kind of a hybrid between what the on-board missionary does and what the tent maker does. While we don't have as many challenges as either of them, there are times that we do need money in a hurry, and that's not always possible. But we do our best because, again, like all missionaries, rely on the faith and trust God for all things. I guess the only thing we have as probably an additional challenge is, of course, we've talked about mission and media in one of our old playlists, is that we do get some people asking us for money, and we do get harassed from time to time. I guess that's something we all have to deal with in the social media world, and obviously being very careful with our words, which is why I'm not dwelling on this particular part of the topic right now. But it also, I guess the other thing is the amount of time it takes to edit. So what is the average time it would take me to edit a video? For something like this, probably 15 to 30 minutes. The Sydney one that we did took me a good several days, up to a week. If it's one over 3 or 4 days, yes, that would take that long. For smaller videos, of course, it might take me a whole day. And of course, it's a challenge if you're not familiar with all the technology that's available. I mean, it's something I've had to learn on the go, and it's something perhaps that unless you're fully up and up with it all, it's going to look pretty raw like this. So these are some of the things that we've shared with you today about the different type of missionaries. It's not to saying anyone is better than the other. There are lots of pros and cons with all of them, and it's something, if you choose to do missions into the future, you might want to think about. If you do want to go down this road, of course, there are modules at acci.org.au that talk about the biblical concepts of mission and all the nuts and bolts that are required. And of course, a lot of local churches these days are doing Alpha Crucis, so you can do some basic learning there to get your feet wet. Just check with your local church and ask if they're doing Alpha Crucis, or if they know of a church that's actually doing it. I know our Connect church is actually doing Alpha Crucis local church in various locations. Or if you're really serious about deep diving in, you can do with Alpha Crucis or another Bible college online, or attend a local campus. The world's your oyster. From all of us here at Mission Connections, and young Charlotte down there, you've seen earlier in the video, have a great one. And next time we're going to be we're just getting to know us. And I don't know if we're going to do a live Q&A or anything like that. But we are definitely going to have some people ask us some questions. And we'll see you next time. And from all of us here, John Martinet, and see you next time. Bye.